All right, so this is going to be juicy because I have never had someone on Becoming You to talk about dating and attraction. So Emily, welcome to the Becoming You podcast.
The way that we date or the way that we present ourselves is representative of what our thoughts and beliefs are about ourselves, about love, relationships, men and women. And so this work is so important to not only do before you've met somebody, especially if you are single. This is a great opportunity to do that.
So I have to share how we met, which ironically is through someone that you attracted, dated, and now are married to, which is my podcast editor, Mike.
Yes.
And, we kind of were in proximity through the dinner series we're part of, but really getting to know him and seeing your relationship and then that beautiful dinner we had in September, your attraction, your polarity, your relationship is so fascinating to me.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm so excited to learn all of the things. So how do you introduce yourself normally? What do you tell people that you actually dive into?
So I'm a dating and attraction coach, but I'm so much more than that.
Absolutely.
Because the way that we date or the way that we present ourselves is representative of what our thoughts and beliefs are about ourselves, about love, relationships, men and women. And that carries over into all areas of our life.
Okay, this is going to be so good. And by the way, I give you full disclosure or permission to absolutely ask me any question that I can answer that my husband will not divorce me for, admitting. Because I know for myself, I did it so wrong so many times. I've had a lot of failed starts and failed marriage before I found my soulmate, who we're still doing a massive amount of work on. So first of all, let's talk about the female entrepreneur, because we are a different animal. So you work with all types of women. What is the typical woman that you work with?
So the typical woman I work with is very driven. So she's usually created a lot of success for herself professionally. But when it comes to love and dating, she just hasn't figured it out.
Oh, check. Well, now. I figured it out now, kind of.
Yeah, we figured it out.
We're married
now. But absolutely, it was a journey for me as well. And it felt so destabilizing to be this type of woman who appeared so together and appeared so optimistic and had all of these, boxes that I had checked, and the husband, the partner to share the rest of my life with wasn't there. As a woman who is, deeply heart-centered, for me, that was such a missing piece. And I knew that it was a deep desire for a reason, so I never gave up on it. But I see a lot of women who come to me who are in those places where they have either been single for a really long time, whether it's that they have never really experienced that safe feeling of love, and so they write it off a little bit. It can be coming out of a divorce and restarting your life, trying to figure out, one, how do I navigate this modern dating world, right? It is very different now than it's ever been before, and it's harder to do it on your own. It really is, because there are so many different dynamics at play. There are so many different interferences at play with online dating, social media. We have a million different outlets to stay distracted and in that what I call shiny object syndrome, where we're always searching for the next best thing.
7, you are married to, I understand that. And obviously I've been with my husband for 14 years now, so that's why you're here. Thank you. 10 years married, but 14 years total. Yeah. I will tell you, I always would describe my life before him as my relationship life was a bit of a train wreck, or at least a roller coaster. Maybe not always a train wreck, but a roller coaster. Yeah. But my defense of that was, but I have always had my professional life and my friends locked in. And so that was my way of excusing the kind of uncertainty and drama of my love life. So, okay, driven woman. And then you also work, what I love about you is you work with men and women.
Yes.
So what type of men do you work with?
I work with just similar as women, very high performing men who are speaking on stages, men who are running businesses, companies, men who are physicians. It's across the board. But the one thing that all these men deeply crave is a dream woman. That true, genuine love, right? People come to me when they have it all and they want the love to match. So we're not looking for average here. We're looking for something extraordinary, and extraordinary takes extraordinary. Oof. So it's really important to look at where are we holding ourselves back from truly experiencing that big love that we so deeply crave. Because if you weren't craving that deep love, you wouldn't still be looking for it. Even if you maybe found what you thought could be it, you weren't willing to settle.
Because this is something I've never interviewed on, we're going to go all over, but we're going to always
come back around.
Okay, so and you're married again to an Enneagram 7. What I will say, so my husband he's an Enneagram 3 like you.
Yes.
So he's an achiever, very successful. And what I don't see very often, I mean, I see it in you and your husband. I see it in Chris and Lori. You know, we're literally here for their event. I often, when I would call it really successful women, I see a mismatch of their partners. When you work with people, do you find that like I know this is from the outside and that's not all of it, but like, are they matched from the outside as well as the inside?
As far as like two high performers together?
I mean, it feels like that's the most combustible combination to me.
It can be, because our partnerships, the way I see it, are really meant to balance us. The beautiful part about doing life with somebody is that we get to see from another perspective, and we get to learn more about ourselves through that perspective. When two high performers come together, two very fiery energies, two people who have their own drive, their own mission, it can be difficult, but it's not impossible. I can say that my husband and I both have equal drive and ambition. He calls me, his nickname for me is Tom Brady. So it's only touchdowns here. What's really important to look at is not necessarily, are you both driven? Are you both entrepreneurs? Are you both high performers? But how are you navigating the art of polarity?
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So as a woman, it is imperative to be in your masculine to build a business.
Or to be successful in a career.
100%. The world is set up for that right now. And we see like a huge turn toward the feminine and the reawakening of the feminine, and it's beautiful and so exciting. But there is
People
a reality.
People aren't getting to become a CEO if they're massively in their feminine right now, typically.
Yes. And what's also important to understand is it's good to have a balance of both within you. You need to have a relationship with both. Otherwise, your partnership is also going to be imbalanced. If a woman has no connection with her masculine energy, it's going to be really hard to be able to understand the masculine parts of your partner and be in full acceptance. Same with men. If there is no connection to your feminine energy, you are going to think that your woman has literally lost her mind when she's expressing herself in certain ways. You're not going to be able to understand that this is a natural process, and it can even make you feel so uncomfortable that you don't want to be around it. So when we look at two people who are high performers, something that can really get in the way of creating that is this idea of control and of needing control, because ultimately, especially for women being in the feminine, that is surrender. A lot of the times what happens is a woman who is not able to release control ends up with a man who she subconsciously knows there is a level that she can control him. And what happens...
He can't break her, right?
Yes. And what happens can't see her, ultimately, right? It is a defense to not be truly seen.
Wow, okay.
Right? If she's always fixing him, if she's always making sure everything's okay, right? This comes a lot of the times from women who feel like if they don't have eyes on the scene at all times, they're not safe. Something's going to go wrong.
Like, right? Identified, check.
Yes. Yeah. And that is a natural aspect of being maternal and being a woman, is to have that perspective. But when it starts going into the dynamic of, I need to check up on him and make sure everything's okay there, and this didn't get done, that didn't get done, and we start keeping score.
And we start nagging and whining.
He shuts down. And when he shuts down, we're no longer getting the very thing that we want the most, which is to be seen and to be loved. Because men, the number one thing they need, in the same way that we need to be seen and loved, is respect. And when they don't feel respect, that's when they pull away. And we look, he's not even showing up for me. And that's where the beliefs come in, right? What I talked about at the beginning. If we, on a subconscious level, don't believe that men can show up for us, that they are competent, that they are true providers, protectors, all the amazing things that men in the masculine bring to this world,
then we won't be vulnerable to allow them to do the thing that they crave the most.
Yes.
The dots are connecting for me now. And I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense.
Yes. So to go back to your original question, it's not so much about that two people with high drive can't be together, but the dynamic that happens in the partnership needs to be different than the dynamic that's happening in your professional life. This is something I've had to learn myself.
No, I mean, my husband and I have done a lot of work on this. And when he met me, I was a little older. I mean, I'm always a little older, but I was 31. I'd been in my career for 9 years. He was 27. He was 3 years out of grad school.
Oh, I didn't know he was younger than you.
He is younger than me. Yeah. I mean, I like to think I look younger, but, I haven't gone gray. Yeah, he's 4 years younger. And I was so far ahead of him just because of the time that I'd been like out into the world. And I had worked full time since I was 18. And I was very driven. And where I was in my career was at a further point than he was, even though, he had a master's and is an engineer. And so he loved that I was a go-getter. He loved that, I was driven and successful in all these things. As I actually asked on our first date, I was like, what are you looking for? He's like, a driven woman with a college degree. And I'm like, okay.
Have you ever asked him why? Why drive?
Ooh, no, but I probably will be texting him tonight to report back to you. No, that's a great question. His mom was, I don't know if he was looking for something different than his mom. His mom was a caregiver. She didn't work. However, what I'll say is it has changed because he loved those things about me. He still does.
Sure.
But then once, we got married and actually not even when we were married, it wasn't a problem. Once we had children, he didn't communicate this until a little over a year ago. And he said, I want you to be like softer and more feminine and more of the matriarch. And he's like, and this is not my husband diminishing me or going to like old standards. Yeah. But he just said, he's like, what we need now is different. And when he said we, being the family, and he's like, we need you to like be like focus on being a mom. And that didn't mean I had to give anything up. It meant more of like my focus.
Yeah.
I did not need to go out and kill it anymore.
Right.
And it actually, as mad as it made me, and it probably took me close to a year to fully embrace what he was saying, but it was actually what I was craving, which is to be able to be vulnerable, to be in my feminine, and to feel protected because I had grown up single mom, dad that left. I feel like it's like the story of most female entrepreneurs. I need no one because if I need someone, I will be hurt.
Yes. And like you said, that can happen from what you experience in childhood. It can also be going through a divorce. And so much of the time we don't allow ourselves to rely on somebody else or trust somebody else to take care of us.
Well, and society is telling us to do something different, which is why look at what the divorce rate is, right?
Yes. And we also grew up in that generation that had so much divorce. So it became safe. And that's not to say that you can't go out there and crush it and do your thing. I'm living, breathing proof of that, right? My husband is very supportive of my business, but it does take a delicate balance of knowing when I leave my office in our home, which is not very far, there's not like a commute home, that my energy will deliberately shift.
This is so, okay, literally everyone listening, listen right now.
And I've done this since the moment I met him. I was not only an entrepreneur when I met him, I was working a full-time corporate job. I was working 80 plus hours per week. I was in my masculine a lot. But every time I knew I was going to communicate with him, I knew I was going to go on a date, I would do something intentional to get into my feminine energy. And I would allow myself to play in the yumminess is the way I like to describe it, of allowing myself to just surrender and let go for that hour, 2 hours.
To really like revel in being a woman.
100%. And I love meditation. And that's also a time where I tell myself there are no decisions that you can make for the next 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, however long the meditation is. And it's so freeing for me. And I think that's been a huge piece of me being able to do that, because it's allowing yourself to be in the discomfort of, oh, he picked a restaurant that I'm like not quite sure about. I'm just going to roll with it.
I don't have to control it.
I don't have to control it. And I'm also not going to make it mean anything about him that he chose that restaurant, because I don't actually know.
I want to go back to this. I call it an energetic buffer.
Okay.
Now I work in my bedroom, which is a big change, and I don't like it, but I haven't figured out how to, it's not such a painful thing that I need to resolve it right now, but I used to have my she shed behind the house. Okay. So I joked like I have a 20 feet commute, but I would notice that I would like pack my day till the end, and then I'd be in a hurry to get inside because I was like, now my family needs me. And it was so dysregulating to them. And my husband would say, your energy needs to come down. Like your energy is
tornado.
Exactly. And it's really interesting, now that I have the perspective of like, oh, wow, like either my kids then came with that same energy, but of a needing energy, or my husband felt, whatever. He's like, this is just way too much. Like all he wanted to do after being in his masculine all day is come home to softness and comfort and calmness, and not to me in like war mode. Creating that buffer, I don't always do it well. Well, now I do it well, because when I pick up my kids 3 hours before he gets home, then we go into like the fun part of the day.
Yeah.
I'm a totally different mother and wife than I was when I was packing my day until like the moment I had to show up in a very different role that required a very different part of myself. So everyone plan an energetic buffer. And what are the things that you recommend women do, again, whether that's 10 minutes or that's 30 minutes, to shift that energy out of CEO mode?
So it's important to understand what the masculine and feminine is, to understand why these exercises are important. So masculine energy is the doing, leading, decision making. It's logical. The feminine is creativity, vulnerability, heart-centered, so connection. So in order to go from that logical place into this feeling space, we need to get you back into your body. Especially female entrepreneurs, we love to live up here, whether it's manifesting, whether it's planning, whether it's doing.
Even visioning, right?
It's all in the head, right? It's all up here. And what happens is we get so disconnected from this and we're living up here that we become reactionary. We become stiff.
Controlling, impatient.
Yes. And so getting back into the body is crucial in order to be in that flow, to allow yourself to not have a rigid schedule or I needed the carrots to be cooked a certain way and now they aren't, and, you know, letting it go. To be in that soft energy. So some of my favorites include meditation, as I said. Others that are really fun are just literally to dance.
I was going to say dance party.
Dance party. Whether it's in your car on your commute home, play that, you know, music that just gets you into your feminine. For me, it's like anything pop related.
I'm like Taylor Swift,
we love a
or
Britney
Odessa,
Spears,
or a 1980s.
Odessa too,
yes.
Absolutely. Rufus Du Sol is a good one if you want to get more into that feels. But dancing, listening to music, doing something creative, breath work is amazing.
Yes.
I know you're a big fan of breath work. Really anything to take yourself out of the thinking, the strategizing, and into the feeling. And what's important to understand is when you do this, you might have uncomfortable feelings come up. We've taught ourselves to be in our heads for a reason, because down here is really intense at times. And it's so much easier to just go up to problem solving instead of being with that. And that's how we get that stuck energy, and that will also affect our relationships. If and when the uncomfortable emotions come up, go with it. Learn to love that release, because at the end of it, it is so beautiful to allow yourself to process that. And when we don't feel it, those emotions don't go anywhere. They don't go away. They literally stay stuck. And it's harder and harder and harder to access that heart space and our womb, which is a huge part of our feminine energy.
Right. I've started doing burlesque dance.
Yes.
Well, here, actually, let me take it back for a moment. It was probably a year and a half or 2 years ago. And I felt really flatlined in my life. And I looked at my calendar and I'm like, everything I'm doing are things I chose, right? I can't blame it on like a boss or a job. And yet I was feeling that. And it was, of course, like, we're not one dimensional. Like, if we're feeling that in our business, it's probably unlikely we're going to just be feeling completely lit up in our sex life, romantic life, you know, friend life. And what I realized when I was like, what is wrong? Like, why am I ungrateful? Why am I feeling this way? And it was because I had almost completely gotten rid of all things that felt like creativity, play, and restoration. And it literally came to me, ironically, in breath work. I was like, I need to do breath work. So I did some breath work. What brings me back? Like, what is the pulse? And it was like CPR. It's creativity, play, and restoration. This is so sad. I wrote down, I was like, well, what feels like creativity, play, and restoration? I couldn't even think right away. I was like, I don't know. I've been so out of this. And since we moved to Carmel, which you and I have a soft spot for.
And the Bay Area.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy, all of the overlaps that, you know, you guys being from the Bay. I've intentionally every week built something in, and which I know is masculine to build it in. Like, it needs to be in my calendar that it happens.
Yeah.
But like my Sunday burlesque classes, and I have a Monday music writing class that I will say right now is stressing me out, because I'm like, wow, this is really forcing me to surrender in ways that, and not.
You are such a 7.
I'm like, you know.
I'm a 3. I'm like, so how would that serve my business or something else practical?
Well,
that's why it's so important for me to get into my 100% too, because that 3 is a lot of masculine.
I will say that actually the for all of the things, the burlesque has been more fun than I could imagine. And ironically, I have a performance next Friday. It is Wednesday.
So excited.
I have not done my QR. I don't even know what my solo choreography is, but I have the vision for it.
Yeah.
I have bought the light machine that reflects the universe. I have my costume in 3 different backups of gloves. I have my Odessa music. It's a moment apart with the weird little intro,
yes.
you know?
Yes, it's perfect.
And I'm coming out in a spacesuit. revealing to a silver suit underneath.
Okay, very
it's
Britney.
Pretty amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But the point is, I was going to say is like, it's the creativity of like the choreography or the vision. It's the play of the dance and the sensuality and like, you know, dance like unwinds our chakras. And my only regret is that I didn't do this sooner. Because I also love ballroom, but you need a partner to ballroom.
You do, and it's more calculated.
It's much more calculated, and it's even though I will choreograph moves. So I was like, I am not good enough at freestyling to do this and not slightly embarrass myself.
One of my favorite things to do to get into my feminine is literally to put on some of that hype music
and I was
on
like,
the
sexy burlesque
on the treadmill,
and
literally pretend it's a catwalk. So if anybody ever sees me on the treadmill walking like I'm 5'10",
literally strutting your stuff.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And I love the dance. I grew up as a dancer, but I was a classically trained dancer. That's not as feminine,
right? Well, because it's about perfection.
It's about perfection. But something like burlesque is so wonderful because it really is about exploring your body and play. So I love that. Other things teasing to do to get into your feminine are like to eat your food slower.
Oh.
And really enjoy it, taste it, right? So much of the time, especially female business owners, we're like, eat when?
Or you're eating in front of a computer while answering emails. Well, now I have a dog, so it's actually much easier because the dog, I need to go out and like hang out with the dog. But when I started to be more intentional about actually building in a lunch break and then walking out of my office, even just to sit outside, and I gave myself permission, that's when I read a lot of my Court of Rose and Thorns books. I will say, I call it cliterature. Okay, I said it. I'm like, my husband very much appreciates when I read those. And I haven't seen the Hulu one yet, but yeah, is that another thing, is to like read just fiction that is not going to do anything for our lives and personal development?
Of course, yes. Right. Anything that sparks that creativity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagination.
Yes, the imagination, but without it having to be a goal.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk for a minute about female entrepreneurs, because as someone who coaches, you know, I mean, I've had nearly 100 women entrepreneurs, 6, 7, and 8 figures in my masterminds and one-on-one coaching.
Yeah.
And something that I have seen throughout it is I've seen either husbands that are in support roles. So they're like, oh, I want to retire my husband, or I want my husband to be supported. Or I have seen single women. And I'm not saying that I don't see happily married women. I do. I would say that every single mastermind I do, which range from 12 to 20 women, 1 to 2 women end up getting divorced at some point in the mastermind or after, like within a year after. And I'm really curious, since you work with a lot of driven women and, you know, obviously entrepreneurs and in corporate, why is that? And especially for my audience that may be navigating that. So first question is like, why is it that there is such a rate of women that either have a support partner, but maybe not what looks like equal, or they end up in divorce as they're growing or scaling their business?
Sure. The support partner, that really depends on what was agreed upon. And usually it's because the woman is having a lot of success and it makes sense for her to continue to do that. To go back, though, it's going to be really important to understand what polarity looks like in that relationship. Now, I say that, and I want to caveat that we all have different, let's call it ratios of masculine and feminine, of what's our core energy. So as women, some of us will have a lot more core feminine energy. Being in that leadership role ever would not feel good to our nervous system, to our body, to our minds. For other women, they might actually have more natural masculine energy and do better in that support role and need a husband who's going to balance the polarity with a little bit more feminine energy and give her the space to do that, to run, to move forward. If a woman is in that role out of survival, though, not because it is her natural inclination, that's where things can go awry. Because what happens in those roles, and one of the reasons why I see so many driven women not happily married, is because they actually attract men who are more passive. Because men believe if she's driven, if she's going after things, she's going to be the type of woman that wants it her way. And she's going to be the type of woman that wants control and wants to do things. So what happens is men who end up being almost pursued by a woman like that, right? Because as high-performing women, a lot of us are go-getters. And I'll speak for myself. When I was single, I had to learn how to stop go-getting after men. That was not working for me. It was not working for me to be like, I'm going to make you my boyfriend, right? It was cute in middle school and high school. Not so much when you're in your mid to late 20s looking for a husband, right? That's going to send them running pretty fast. But what happens is they get into this dynamic where she has become the leader in the relationship. Without a conscious effort from both partners, it's really, really hard to see that that's what's happened. Because what happens is the man shuts down and the woman becomes resentful. She feels like she's the one pulling all of the weight, doing all of the things, having to make sure everyone's okay, things are moving forward. She doesn't get any time to rest. She's also like, not creating energetic boundaries to rest.
And then he becomes a petulant child who won't do his chores.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And we see that, like, mothering dynamic happen there, which isn't sexy for either person. And when you don't have the ability to communicate about it, or even just the language to communicate about it, it makes it very difficult. And, something that is just so heartbreaking to me is I see so many relationships, especially now with like early dating, those first few months, and not because the people aren't right for each other, but because we start to see parts of ourselves in the process of dating relationship that we don't like and that we're uncomfortable with.
So it's easier to quit it than to fix it.
Yes. And that's, we actually can quit it in relationship and marriage without leaving it too.
Oh, that's the quiet quitting.
The quiet quitting, right? Like the ghosting of relationship, because we don't actually talk about it. We don't have the hard conversations. Right. We just shut down. And a woman or a man might use work as the escape and building the business until the other person
And the woman also might use investing all of her time in her children and kind of ignoring it.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so funny when you were talking about, the woman like controlling everything. Even though my husband was attracted to me and drawn to me because I was, a go-getter, but I also was always very fun. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, I'm a 7. You're married.
Fun? I'm like,
it's always an adventure, right?
You'll have to prove it to me.
I know. It's always going to be an adventure. However, I can remember my husband was playing hockey like for fun on the side, he was an engineer, and I'm sure I was doing 74 different passions and hobbies. I think I was like volunteering with foster children and taking, of course, like yoga classes and planning trips. But he told me, I said, I'd love to go to one of your hockey games sometimes. He's like, yeah, that would be great. And then he mentioned it again. He's like, yeah, one of these days. I knew he played hockey on Thursday because it was the only night that he didn't, that we weren't together.
Yeah.
And finally I was like, when is he? I mean, I'm a planner. I love to plan. Mm-hmm. And I like to know it's my calendar, even though sometimes I overplan. Mm-hmm. And we were on the boat. It was like on a Sunday. And I said, oh, by the way, because he would always say like, oh, I'll look it up. I'm like, I just looked at, I like found his as a rare name. I looked up his hockey league.
Yeah.
I found the schedule. I'm like, here's the games I'm available for. And he told me later, he was like, him and his friend looked at each other like, psycho. Yeah. Fortunately, he was able to move past that. But to me, I'm like, let's not talk about it. Let's just get it done.
Yeah.
That was not what he was looking for.
Well, what's important to recognize with men is it's always the next urgent thing. So they're very compartmentalized. Women, we have a hard time understanding this because our brains are everywhere all at once.
Right.
And I know this is like age-old education around the sexes, but it is so true. That's why you can ask your husband to take out the trash and he doesn't do it immediately. He might not even do it in the next couple hours because there's something else more urgent. And I feel like sometimes we can take a cue from them when it comes to business, but it's important to recognize that we're wired differently. And so him not inviting you to the game likely had nothing to do with him not wanting you to be there, but simply it wasn't the next most urgent task.
What advice do you have for someone that is for a woman that is in expansion in her business or in her career? I'll use myself as an example. We're both very driven. There's like different seasons where one of us is more focused on that than the other. So how do you continue to balance that polarity as it's shifting for you in different seasons of your life?
It's much easier to do it when he's the one who is the busier, more driven one. It allows you to have the opportunity, if you choose to take it, to practice that trust and surrender and allow yourself to be supportive of him in different ways. I love this idea. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially being newly married. How we're able to create a container where, as a driven woman, you get to still have that drive, you still get to have that ambition, even if it's not the thing that you thought it was going to be toward, but rather the ambition and drive to create the best unit you possibly can and to be that piece on the checkerboard, right? And that's not to say that you need to give up everything in order to do that, but in those seasons where you are being asked as a partner, hey, I need your help here, or you recognize this might be a season where I'm actually more needed over here, to realize that you don't have to lose yourself in that.
100%.
In fact, it can help you experience a different side of yourself that you might not have before and help you be more whole.
When he told me, when he went into the startup world, now it was our first one, so I didn't know what it was like. Now I've got the war scars from it, but I remember saying, like, I believe in what you're doing. I believe in you. I told him from the beginning, like, I never had a doubt that he would not be successful. He had lots of doubts. I mean, he's an Enneagram 3. Yes. And I'm a 7. I'm like, of course it's going to happen. Of course you're going to create it. I told him, I said, my commitment to you is that I will do anything you need to ensure, like, I will never say no. And that, sometimes it made me mad because I had, me being a planner, I'm like, I have these plans. And he's like, right now, this thing changed and I need your support or I need your help. And that usually was logistical as well as emotional. But I also, when he sold the startup, it also allowed me to really receive in the fact that he's like, this could have never happened without you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You provided the safety, the certainty, the security. I mean, also, by the way, we had a 1-year-old when he started it and we had 2 kids when he sold it. He's like, you provided all of those things so that I could go. And again, Enneagram 3, see a goal, hit a goal. I'm like, I know you were going to hit it.
Yes.
So I knew I had to be the person to be able to provide the ability. And again, it was really hard.
Sure. And yet here you are being the total rock star entrepreneur that you are and creating the most amazing communities for women and doing the thing even through that season.
And I will share though, after he sold, my biggest probably burnout and challenging time in our relationship was probably 1.5 to 2 years after he sold. Because I mean, we had a life and legacy altering event in our life, right? And in a positive way. I didn't take it as, oh wow, I can relax in what I helped co-create. The competitive person in me was like I'd always in every relationship been ahead of the other person.
Oh, interesting.
In professionally, in business, in what I earned, even with my husband. And all of a sudden he went like, it wasn't like this. He was like, yes, I was like, I'm like 1,000 feet higher in, elevation. And all of a sudden my husband was like freaking past the moon.
Right.
And I was like, well, now I need to prove that I can do what he did. Not exactly, but like I could have that same type of success. And that created so much disharmony, so much dysregulation because I could not outwork it. Because the reality is we're different people. I mean, even just in our Enneagrams, I didn't have the same goal.
Right.
I didn't have the same hunger and I didn't have the same need. And when we finally sat down with a therapist and Tracy, an Enneagram, and he's like, this isn't what our family needs. And is it really what you want? And I finally got really clear in my body. I'm like, it actually isn't.
Right.
Like I love doing the things that I love well.
Yeah.
But right now where I'm like working 25 hours a week and I still have the ability when I want to like do fun things like fly out for 2 days and live podcasts with people I love and feel expansive. And then I can go home and I can be the best mom for my children, not from even a competitive standpoint, just from like I can give my family absolutely what they need.
Yes.
And I am so privileged to have the resources to do that.
Yes.
But I was one blocking my own blessings, as you will say, to actually receive what we and he had worked so hard for.
Did you find that your worth was tied to your achievements?
100%.
Yeah.
Even though, again, it's funny because I got mistyped as an Enneagram 3.
Yes.
I think it was 2 things. It was one, I really had a hard time receiving because in my upbringing, receiving was always around. There was always stipulations. My husband's like, you have half of everything. And it wasn't like, we were going into like with a divorce contract, but he's like, we're a partnership. Yeah. And my husband's the type, and this is such a 3 thing of him to say, but he was like, I will never leave you. And if you can't make it work with me, you can't make it work with anyone. Because he's like, I will never leave. Right? He's like, I will do whatever it takes. And I love him for that.
Oh, sweet.
I always knew my worth because of my achievements.
Yeah.
Even though that's not where I personally got value, it's where I felt other people valued me. And I felt like, well, who am I if I'm in the shadow? Or who am I? Like, I had a really hard time when someone's like, oh, Gino's done that. Like, I couldn't take any credit for it. Because I'm like, well, I'm the wife. Like, I wasn't the co-driver.
But you were an instrumental piece of it all.
And he literally said, he's like, Rebecca, this could have never happened without you. Even him leaving his job. He's like, you left your job and everyone thought you were crazy. And I saw the freedom and the growth that you had doing the thing you were excited about. And that inspired me. He's like, I would have never done any of these things had I not seen you do it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is 3.5 years later. It took me 2 years of struggling and actually fighting him to receive, to be able to be in my feminine, to actually just receive.
What were you afraid was going to happen if you just allowed yourself to receive?
There's two things. So one was the rewiring of my worth based upon I didn't have to be and do, and I didn't have to work for it. I mean, I still work for it in other ways because, let's face it, I'm a mom of a 5 and an 8-year-old, right? The other thing is I was so worried about how, and this is funny because in a lot of ways I don't care about judgment at all. My Enneagram 7, my 2.
Yeah, you guys are lucky with that.
Yes, I know. I'm like, what? You know, I was like, people are going to say I'm like, I'm too old to be the trophy wife for someone younger than me. But they were going to be like, oh, well, she's the wife. She's the this, she's the that. And I think I was so afraid of feeling devalued as not a contributor. I contribute in a lot of different ways. And he's like, you can contribute financially, but honestly, that's the least important thing right now that we need.
But also, even without the contribution, just knowing that you're worthy of receiving that just because. That is taking and took a lot of work. That's life's work.
A lot of rewiring.
That is life's work. But that is something so common in so many female entrepreneurs, and men too, is that subconscious belief that love is an achievement.
Absolutely.
And that we have to do something to be loved. And when that's not there, we almost feel empty. And a lot of the times what happens too is people get in relationship dynamics where that's not there. It's actually a healthy dynamic. You're not having to prove yourself. You're not feeling like this person might leave you. And we find reasons to leave that because that dopamine cycle isn't there.
Oh, I mean, I've got off the dopamine train. Yes. You know, I'm like much into serotonin land now. Okay, so what I'm taking away is, one is the polarity is so important, and within yourself of understanding your own masculine and feminine energies, and where is the right time to tap in or harness either, depending on where in your life it's required. The other is just like in our inherent worth, and when I think that the work has to happen there first, because we can't outwork that.
Yes.
Talk to me. So for all my listeners out there that are, whether they're newly single or they're veteran single, because most of my listeners are either female business or they're driven women. Women. They may not be an entrepreneur, but driven women. What are the steps to finding like that expansive, healthy, balanced, matched love?
Ooh, beautiful.
Because we're wanting to all create this in our business, right? This business that I always say, like, we are the human being breathing life into our business, but we're also the human being breathing life into our relationship. So how do they do that? Because I can't tell them. I've only done it once.
Well, the first place to look is, what have your current patterns been? Look at
like attachment styles.
But also looking at what type of people you've been attracting. How have you been interacting with them? That's going to give you clues on what beliefs are creating your dating experiences and your relationship experiences. In all my work, it always starts with understanding first, where are we at today? What are your actual beliefs? I mean, radical honesty here, no holding back. How do you really feel about men? How do you really feel about yourself? Because same in business. We do this in business. We understand that there is an energetic capacity that we hold where no matter what strategy we put in front of ourselves, we're not going to be able to meet it until we're aligned with it.
100%.
And it's the same thing with the relationships. We need to understand where that disconnect is between you and what you really desire and how you're actually standing in your way of it. We all have ways that we self-sabotage actually creating what it is that we want. So in business, it can be we make a whole bunch of money and then we're poorly managing our finances in business and it goes away. And so we're always still feeling like we're scrapping it, right? In dating, it can be we keep attracting these people and maybe we are over investing or we start pursuing men and we throw off the polarity, or we find reasons to leave as soon as somebody's about to get close, right? This whole like new idea of the ick. I did a reel on this the other day. People are talking about it like the hip young crowd. And they're talking about how this person gave them the ick. I see that and I immediately recognize that this is somebody who has a subconscious fear of getting close to someone, of being seen by somebody. So it's really easy for us to focus on this one little negative piece to take away all of the possibilities of them being a good partner. And the ick a lot of the times is really just a human being a human. And when we judge other humans, we're
really judging ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really important to look at where are you self-sabotaging in that process. It can also be the partners you choose. So many female entrepreneurs have a subconscious attraction to unavailability. It gives us the rush, it gives us the chase, and it comes from that same belief that we need to do something to be lovable, that we're finally going to experience that unconditional love from this person who is not capable of giving it to us, and that little girl inside all of us is finally going to get the love that she's always wanted. And we will chase that feeling time and time again until we realize it is no longer serving us.
It took me until I was in my 30s.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Close to.
And I've always been attracted to kind of a combination, usually very, very driven men and passionate. And when I say passionate, I don't mean like Latin lovers, you know, but, well, maybe some of that. No. Never mind, honey, you didn't hear that. But people that were passionate, whether it was like goals, vision, like whatever they were doing, there was like passion.
Yeah.
Yet, and my husband is that. He's a driven, passionate person.
Yes.
But also a much healthier driven person. And the last thing I want to ask is, so let's say someone attracts someone and they're in a relationship or even a marriage and there's a healthy balance. What are your tips? And I mean, you're living this. What are your tips for continuing that? Because like who we were 31 and 34 when we got married, which was 10 years ago, has changed dramatically. I mean, through having children, through 10 years together. And what I found is like, you could even both be growing, right? Because what I often see in, like I said, the clients that have ended up in divorce is one person's massively growing, the other person isn't.
Right.
And so there's threatening or there's just too big of a gap if someone isn't willing to catch up, and they have to catch up because they want to, not because the fear of loss.
Right.
It's a very different motivator, but they're growing in different directions, even if they're intentionally growing. So how do you continue to grow in the same direction?
Well, the obvious answer is communication. In making sure that you're sharing the direction that you want to go in and acting as teammates. How are you both going to get there? And if you both want to go in different directions, it's not to say that the relationship is over, but how do you, kind of navigate, sway side to side and recognize that might just be a season to get through. Just like you talked about your seasons that you've been going through. This misconception that we'll live happily ever after, right? Disney did a great job at this. And we do when we choose to, because there will always be seasons and there will always be change in dynamics. And that's the beautiful part of finding that person who is going to be a match for you. Because when you are driven, when you are an entrepreneur, I mean, hello, we have chosen the path of self-actualization and entrepreneurship. And
then we've chosen a partner that's doing the same thing.
Yes, and we get double whammy. You need a partner who's going to be invested in that growth with you. That is the number one thing that I looked for in my dating life, was somebody who was going to want to not only grow, but be supportive of my growth, and to be able to see not just who I was then, but who I was becoming, and to be able to support that and not project what he wanted or what would make him feel safe based on his subconscious programming onto me.
So good. Okay, I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
How did you actually become this expert in, dating, attraction, polarity? Because I'm listening to you, and like I've worked with couples coaches, I've worked with therapists, and you are able to like speak it and break it down in a way that is so both unique and also freaking spot on.
Wow. Thank you.
So how? Tell me the ways.
Thank you. So it's a lifelong story. A lot of what I teach is wisdom. It's not knowledge. My love life was a reality TV show at its finest.
You lived a lot of life in your dating life?
Yes, but so much so that in preschool I had a boyfriend. I've always been fascinated with love, call it my Libra, the sign of partnership. It's literally baked into me that love and relationships was something I was so drawn to. So of course, when you're that young and you're drawn to romantic love, you're going to experience a lot of ups and downs because your identity is tied to your relationships. Right. So ultimately, I found myself after 2 back-to-back long-term breakups in my mid-late 20s, single, moving back to the Bay Area from Monterey, going, okay, well, this time I know what I'm going to do. I know what I want. Getting on the apps, feeling like I had the world at my fingertips when it came to eligible men, and started dating. I started to notice that it was really easy for me to get dates. It was really easy for me to usually get a second date. And after that, it was much, much more difficult. And I didn't understand, because it was always so easy for me to get a boyfriend my entire life. That was not something that came hard to me. And I realized that there was a very different lesson that I was meant to learn. And I wasn't accepting of that at the moment. I kept trying.
What was the lesson?
The lesson was ultimately to find the love that I was searching for within me, was to actually go through this healing journey and ultimately to be able to serve the way that I am today. If I hadn't had, 3 years of dating in the modern dating world under my belt, navigating all these different dynamics with all these different types of men, then I would not actually have the experience to be able to hold space for people having really deep emotions. Dating relationships are the most personal aspects of our life. They're mere reflections of us and our shadow. So ultimately, I was out there dating. I realized things weren't going well, so I started researching. Why is love so hard for somebody like me? Came over attachment theory. Polarity, masculine and feminine dynamics. Downloaded all the texting manuals I possibly could about how to be a great texter. Did all the things until I finally realized I was able to conceptually understand the work, and it still wasn't applying to my dating life. I was still finding myself in these loops of chasing unavailable men, of just attracting the wrong people, of not feeling attracted to the man who wanted to choose me. And so I decided to hire a coach for myself. What I thought was just going to be a journey to my husband turned into my life's purpose. And, she saw it in me before I even did and gave me that little nudge, because I was like, yeah. You know what? I will wait until I find my partner. Then he'll help financially support me. I'll be able to leave my corporate job, and then I'll become a coach and help women do what I did. And the universe laughed in my face and said, you're going to do this much sooner, and you're going to start with men. Because I realized here are all these women, because I was surrounded by a lot of women doing the work, doing all the things. And if men weren't also exposed to the same work, we were never going to be able to be those partners like I just talked about, right? The two people who are able to grow together. And so I just knew, I just got straight download walking on the beach in Hermosa Beach, that it was meant for me to start with men. And so, of course, as soon as I got engaged, women started knocking on my door, aka coming into my DMs, really wanting to work with me. And so it started this spiral where now I get to serve both, because the universe was holding me to my promise. But throughout all of that, I went through extensive training with my coach. She was a licensed therapist for 15 years before, clinical therapist before becoming a love coach. And so it's really been a combination of wisdom and training and experience.
And you're getting to do it in real life.
Yeah.
I love it. It makes so much sense, because there, like I said, there are so many women that are doing the work. And it's why when I was little, I wanted to have one daughter and 3 sons, because I was like, there needs to be more great guys out there, and you're helping them become that.
Yes. And there are so many great men out there, ladies. I promise I coach them every day, and it's just really about energetically aligning yourself with him.
So basically people need to go to who follows you that are men, because those men are paying attention and they want real relationships.
Yes. I announced something recently.
Tell me about
a co-ed course coming up. I don't know when this is going to come out.
Is this going to also be like there's a matchmaking service to this?
No matchmaking service, but there will be opportunity to connect with each other. I love the idea of still having that like somewhat organic meeting, so that way there really is a different dynamic than with matchmaking.
Because I was joking like men need to go to personal development events, even like a Tony Robbins, which is very, very masculine, because the women you're going to meet.
Yes.
Or for women, the men you're going to meet. But I mean, this is even better is someone that's like, I know that I want to create this type of love, and I'm willing to do the work on myself.
Yes.
To find, not only to find it, but to make sure that I can keep it. So good.
And one thing that I find that is so, like, it's separating us on such big levels right now in dating is we're coming to the table with judgment instead of connection. By getting men and women in the room together, the Zoom room, then we're able to hear each other's perspectives and realize that it's not about men versus women, women versus men. It's about how do we work together to create something really beautiful that's going to propel both of us forward.
Well, and they're in a room with your wisdom and guidance, like the container that has been set up so that they can be there and they can like tap into that. So good.
Yes.
Okay. Last question.
Yeah.
What does becoming you mean to you?
I love that question. What that means to me is that you're able to experience yourself in relationship. That's not necessarily romantic, but like I've said, relationships are our biggest mirrors. And when you can be in a relationship and see those not so pretty sides of yourself and learn how to show yourself compassion and forgiveness and be able to do that for your partner also, well, now you're coming closer and closer to being you, because that's really what we are at the end of the day. We're love.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.